the bare bones of your thesis are that we are not primates. We have been misclassified as primates, and somebody needs to do something about this.
It's a deliberate effort to mislead people about this. There was a famous study that was done decades ago, which claimed that humans were 98.6% the same genetically.
Okay, that has been said a billion times. What exactly does that mean? No one knows. It's just repeated and repeated and repeated to kind of push this idea that we're extremely similar.
It's literally not true. Just as like we're literally not primates, we don't meet the definitional requirements of the order. We literally are not 98.6% the same genetically as chimps. And this has been known by people who are familiar with the genetics for a very long time.
Okay, so we have to deal with this as the chimp in the room. Why do they keep pushing this? Now that we know it's dramatically false, why do some people seem to be so invested in the idea that we are biologically similar to chimps?
Well, you know the answer.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to Socrates in the City. Today we're having a Socrates in the Studio event. My guest here in New York is someone I like to call Jonathan Leaf. That's his name. He's a playwright. He's a journalist. His play, his drama Pushkin, was selected as one of the 4 best plays of 2018 by the Wall Street Journal. His play, The Caterers, received rave reviews in The New Yorker, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Daily News, The New Criterion, Broadway World, Show Business Weekly, National Review, many other publications. He's written many other plays. As a journalist and critic, his writing has been featured in National Review, The Daily Beast, Spectator, Tablet, Mosaic, New York Post, City Journal, Weekly Standard, First Things, The American Conservative, The New York Sun, many other publications. It is a joy to have as my guest Jonathan Leaf. Jonathan, thanks for coming today.
Thank you. I'm a huge admirer of yours, so it's a big thrill to be here.
Well, now we've just lost the whole audience. They're thinking, who is this guy? Now, it's sort of funny. Normally, I would, thank someone for coming and whatever, and you came all of like 15 blocks. Like you didn't walk here, but you could have walked here. You've hardly made any effort, so thank you for coming. But it's really, honestly, you are whatever the opposite of the Golden Hubcap Award is. You get that. We've never had a guest who was so close to where we are. But listen, you have a new book out called The Primate Myth. Let me start with you as a writer, because the book, The Primate Myth, this is absolutely fascinating. But as a writer myself, I particularly enjoy great writing, and you don't just traffic in ideas. You're a great writer. If I can embarrass you here, your writing has been praised. But just reading this book, The Primate Myth, I haven't read the whole thing, but your writing is really compelling, and I want to say that up front because there's so many books filled with great or important ideas that aren't all that readable. So congratulations on being a very, very readable writer.
Wow, thank you. You're a fantastic writer. So that I'm
well, writing readability, it just matters to me, and I try in my own books to do that. But you're such a wonderful writer. Before we get into this book, The Primate Myth, which really is so fascinating, I just want to ask you about your own story. How did you, come to be who you are, the writer that you are? Where did you grow up? What's the arc of your path to this point?
Well, I suspect it's not very interesting. That's probably the first thing to say. I grew up in New Jersey. I lived in Trenton when I was in high school, which is a city, I always say it's sort of like the South Bronx, but without New York. So it didn't have a lot going for it. Then I went to college where I met our mutual friend, John Smirek, among other people. And
you met John at Yale.
That's right. And
so that means that we crossed over there, I guess, briefly.
I'm a little younger. So
you're younger. So
yeah.
I crossed over with John and you crossed over with John. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I got out of college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And at some point, I went on a TV game show, and I won some money on a TV game show. And I stopped working for a period of time.
You're not going to tell us the name?
It was called The Challengers. Dick Clark was the host. And by the way, he was a very nice man. The people who worked for him adored him, which, tells you a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I won some money. I quit work for a while, and I got the idea to write a play, which I showed to people, and they're like, gee, maybe you have some talent at that. And eventually I kind of drifted into playwriting and other kinds of writing. And, it's incredibly lucrative work. I'm being facetious. So, but at some point I also got interested in the subject of human evolution. And my parents were psychologists. And I grew up with discussions of different psychotropic drugs, neurotransmitters, that kind of thing. That was the thing that
But
people
didn't we all grow up with those conversations? And the answer would be, no, we didn't. Okay, so your parents were obviously also brainy. And so you keep going. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, no. Anyway, so in the last 20 years, an enormous amount of new information has come out about our brain, the brains of chimps, the brains of gorillas, et cetera. And I started following this stuff. And maybe the immediate cue to writing this book was I was with a friend in a park, not so far from here, Stuyvesant Park, you may know, which is on, I guess, 15th, 16th Street here on the east side. And my friend is a big dog lover, as so many people are. And he was planning, he has a good deal of money, he's a wealthy guy. He was planning to go see his wife and daughter in Pennsylvania. He has a townhouse here in New York, but he was planning to go visit his wife and daughter in Pennsylvania. And he leaned over to me and very, very quietly whispered that he was going to do this, and he was going to get in his car, he was going to drive there. And sometime later, I asked him, why did you whisper that to me? And he said, well, the dog knows the word car. And the dog gets very upset when he hears the word car because he knows that I'm going to be leaving. And that got me interested because, of course, you could never have this kind of experience with a chimp, for instance. And,
not that I've tried, to be honest.
No.
But but I read that in your book, and that really cracked me up. The idea that dogs are, because the book is the Primate Myth about primates, but how smart dogs are.
Yeah.
And the idea that he knew that he could not mention the word car without upsetting the dog. And even that concept of, you don't worry about upsetting a snake or a goldfish.
No.
But the dog would be rattled, emotionally rattled, if it heard the word car.
Right. So that got me more interested, and I started doing my own research on the subject. And the book is not...
On what subject?
Human evolution.
I was going to say cars?
Yeah, cars.
Dogs,
Lamborghinis, Maseratis. Anyway, the book is not an attack on the theory of evolution, nor is it questioning that humans are related to primates. But what the book is essentially saying is, as more and more research has come out in the last 20 years, it becomes obvious that we're not much like chimps and gorillas, chimps especially, and that this model for understanding people is mostly false, and also that it has had a variety of motivations. One we were just talking about before the camera started rolling is that it served to promote atheism. And I say this as somebody who's not particularly religious. I'm not saying this to persuade people of the existence of God. I read your wonderful book, Is Atheism Dead? That's not my purpose. But just to say that we should be aware that there's a political context when people like Richard Dawkins are saying, oh, we're just souped up chimps, and how could this show the hand of divine providence? Are we really that different than primates?
Right.
This is all false. And it has a political slash religious motivation behind it.
Oh, I mean, it's, there's false and then there's false. People are so patently pushing an agenda that I can't help but be offended by it. I mean, it's one thing if you have a different narrative or some different views, but they seem to really be putting their shoulder to the wheel, whether it's Jane Goodall or the guy you mentioned, his name starts with a W.
Franz de Mol, yeah.
Yes. These, what are they, chimp researchers?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're chimp researchers?
Yeah.
I just like the word chimp. Chimp researchers, they're not chimps who do research. I want to be very clear. These are human beings who would describe themselves as primates researching chimps, but they have a narrative that they seem to be very evangelistic about. And in your book, you touch on some of the examples of that. I found myself kind of shocked that this thesis, it's like a religion to them.
It is. I think there's no question about that. By the way, I want to say about Jane Goodall, the book could not have been written without the research that she did, she and her associates. She did amazing, amazing research. The question I have about her is, was she a little like Columbus? And I know recently Columbus has come under attack, but Columbus was an extraordinary person, a very brave person, a very intelligent person, and he changed our world. The question is, did he fully understand what he did? And I think this is the same question about Jane Goodall. If you read her books, a lot of the research that she presents contradicts the idea that we're very much like chimps. So just to point to one of
her research contradicts the idea,
yeah,
but she was very vocal that we are very much like chimps.
Well, sometimes she, just like Columbus, sometimes implied, well, maybe I didn't actually get to India. There are, and I quote in the book, instances where she says, the really important thing is the differences between humans and chimps. And then there are other times where she says, there's this profound commonality. But just to cite one of, we could go on and on and on about this. One of the things that she and her researchers discovered is that chimps regularly eat chimp babies.
Excuse me, we're gonna have to cut that out. Now, when I read this in your book, I just thought, we were raised, you're a little bit younger than I am, but what was his name? J. Alfred Muggs.
Yeah.
He was was he on the early version of the Today Show?
I think that's right.
So it's this kind of cute chimp on roller skates with, smoking a cigar. And then there was a series, I'm pretty sure you missed this, but it was called Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp. And it was on Saturday mornings. And the whole show was chimpanzees, solving crimes, but dressed up in these... But the idea that we are, that they're just like us, or whatever. I've lived in the world where that's not questioned. So when I read in your book that chimpanzees consume baby chimpanzees,
yes,
I confess to have been taken aback.
Yeah, she and her assistants observed a lot of it. One of the instances...
A lot of it?
Yeah, one of the ones they talked about is within the small troop that they were studying, there was a mother-daughter, not father-son, mother-daughter pair called Passion and Palm, who ate 10.
Excuse me. I know you're not trying to be funny. I know you're not.
Yeah.
But there was a mother and daughter pair of chimps.
Right.
And their names were?
Well, they were given by humans, Passion and Palm.
Obviously. But they're named Passion and Palm. So we humanize them even by giving them these names, Passion and Palm.
Yes.
And you're telling me that this mother-daughter team killed and ate many young
baby chimps. Yeah, they ate 10. They ate 10. 10 they saw. 10 they saw. 3 of them from their own troop. 7 were from other troops. But they ate 3 from their own troop. They call this filio-cannibalism. It's not unusual among chimps. They call it what? Filio-cannibalism.
Filio-cannibalism?
Yeah, and it's also displayed among supposedly bonobos, or much like there, which are a subspecies or a related species of primate. They're not like this, but actually they do filio-cannibalism as well. We've observed it with...
Why don't we just call it cannibalism? Cannibalism is strictly human beings?
I don't know.
Filio-cannibalism?
You'll even eat chimps who could be related to you. And it's not because they're starving. They're not starving. They're just really different, and they're extremely violent. So just, if I could just...
whatever we call it.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear on this program. We're not recommending it. No, it is so, again, it was so chilling that I said we need to touch on this. So thank you for bringing it up, because you don't think of, you hear about hamsters, eating tiny hamster, you hear about that. But the idea of chimps, you were making another point, forgive me, but I'm just so amazed when you say they observed it many times.
Yes. But also they're super violent, and they kill each other at phenomenal rates. So for instance, now, because chimps are so dangerous, they're mostly observed with binoculars. They're not, Jane Goodall actually got to the point where she had such good rapport with some of the chimps she studied that she was able to feed them out of her own hand. No one will do this anymore. It's just too dangerous. They'll eat your fingers. they'll grab at your face and rip your nose off. There are all sorts of dangerous things they'll do.
They'll grab your face and rip your nose off.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Something like 2/5 of all primate researchers claims they've been bitten and they'll be missing parts of pinkies and, et cetera.
Listen, you've written a whole book on this, so you've moved past being shocked at it. But again, having been raised in a world where every chimp uses roller skates, smokes cigars, and laughs at jokes, this is new information. You're saying that they're particularly violent.
They're incredibly violent.
Why?
I mean, unbelievable.
I mean, why? I guess they had a tough upbringing as chimps.
They're a totally different animal than humans. And actually, I was gonna go into just the rates that they kill each other because they're astounding.
So, but we don't call it murder, of course, because they're chimps.
I guess. I mean, we can. You get into all these kind of semantic questions.
I know.
But the average chimp researcher will see a corpse of a chimp that was killed by another chimp once every 8 years. So if you're out in the field, within 8 years, you'll see a corpse. And within 3 years, you'll see a corpse of a chimp that was killed by another chimp. Within 8 years, you'll see a chimp kill another chimp on average. This is on average.
On average.
On average. So
you can set your watch.
Yeah, but there are all sorts of things that we associate with humans that we never see in chimps. For instance, there's never been a documented case, in fact, in any primate of any primate committing suicide, which worldwide we know is a much bigger problem. With humans, it leads to many more deaths in humans than it does in.
Well, I don't think
than murder does.
Do any animals? I guess in your book you say that animals commit suicide, but it's different than humans committing suicide somehow, at least as I read it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are different types of suicide. So there's what's called altruistic suicide, which is, you commit a suicide to like kamikazes in the Second World War, or in Roman times where people fell on their swords, where you're committing a suicide that's to on behalf of the people or the nation or the group or your children or whatever it is. There are also egoistic suicides where people, they've given up hope and they feel there's no future for them and they choose to commit suicide. We have observed altruistic suicide exists among insects, but also we know that dolphins and whales will both individually and collectively strand themselves and beach themselves. So we do have evidence.
Why would they do that?
A very interesting question.
Loss of hope? I can't think of a dolphin having hope.
One point I would make, getting back to the subject of we're not like primates. So why are we not like primates? Well, we have 3 attributes that primates don't have. One is that we use language, which is really fundamental.
Speak for yourself, Jonathan.
Yeah.
No, okay.
Okay. A second is
I want to come back to that. That's a big subject, language
Yeah.
and cocoa, and go ahead.
A second is that we're a cooperative animal. And there are many cooperative animals, but primates are not, for the most part, cooperative animals. Okay, that's really fundamental. I mean, many people have probably heard the economist Milton Friedman used to ask the riddle, how many people in the world know how to make a pencil? You've heard this before?
Never heard it.
Oh, well, you know the answer?
No.
There are none. Nobody knows how to make a pencil.
How many people know how to make a pencil? And the answer is none.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because
one person deals with the graphite, and one person deals with the yellow strip on the outside, and one person deals with that metal ring, and one person, or actually many people, we cooperate, we collaborate. Let alone a cell phone. I mean, obviously nobody has any clue how to, I mean, there are engineers who know different aspects of it, but nobody could tell you how the whole thing's put together. They only have the vaguest idea. So we work together, every single day in all sorts of ways, and advanced societies depend upon this. And the collapse of societies like, let's say, Cuba, is because there's very little effective cooperation and collaboration.
Think of the irony. A collectivist society ought to be
Exactly. But in any event, so that's the second thing. So we're cooperative, we use language, we're cooperative. And then the third thing, which is not true of any primate, is we're domesticated. We're a tame animal. People...
Isn't that ultimately a relative concept? I mean, how do we define what is tame or domesticated? What do you mean by that, I guess I should ask?
Well, I think it is somewhat subjective. For instance, my wife and I have 2 cats, and I think people would argue that cats are less domesticated than dogs.
Right.
Isn't that the general belief?
Yes.
But the other side is you can live with a cat. The cat won't. The cat does not. Yeah.
Isn't that because it's not big enough to eat you, but that it might if it were?
I don't think so. I mean, and actually, you might make the point, which I do make in the book, that there are lion tamers, and there are a lion, which is not a domesticated animal, but it can be a little bit domesticated. There's no such thing as a chimp tamer. If you've ever seen chimps up close, they're extremely dangerous, violent animals. I mean, baby chimps, which they use in movies, are kind of charming and adorable. But an adult chimp is a very, very dangerous animal.
I'm sorry that I find the idea of violent chimps inherently funny, but I do. I don't know. I mean, forgive me, because actually I want to get to some really serious examples of this, which are not funny. But what you just said about lion tamers, I mean, they're tiger tamers.
Yeah. Well, there was actually a Buddhist monk in Thailand who lived with, he lived in this park where they had tigers, and he lived with them for like 20 years, and then one of them did in fact kill him. But the idea that you can't live with chimps, there's no such concept. I mean, a tiger is an animal that could kill you anytime it wants to. All it has to do is pull out its huge paw. It can rip your neck off, or sever your jugular.
So this Buddhist monk was a pretty daring fellow to give 20 years of his life to living with tigers. Any particular reason?
Pretty crazy. I don't know. I saw a documentary about him.
Sounds pretty screwy to me.
Yeah, it sounds pretty screwy. But the point is, you could actually do it. It has actually been done. You can't do this with chimps. You can't go live with chimps.
Now, I just have to ask, haven't people done this? There's a horribly, horribly gruesome story of a woman who for many years lived with a chimp and was mauled horrifically.
Yeah, that's right.
About 10 or 15 years ago.
That's right. Connecticut, wasn't it?
Yes, but she did, for quite a long time, live with this chimp. So I assumed that there were examples of this.
You know, maybe to some extent. And a lot of cases, like they actually had a documentary on HBO recently called Chimp Crazy. And it was about a woman, it was a woman who
You're just making that up to correct me up.
No.
Come on.
She abducted a chimp that she wanted to keep, but she had the chimp under lock and key. The chimp was not like, wandering around the apartment. The chimp was semi-caged and under lock and key.
But again, now I am obviously a product of decades of chimp propaganda.
Right.
Because I think of chimps as being friendly, appearing on TV shows. I don't think of them as inherently dangerous. The chimps that I've seen seem to have been tamed. So I feel like I must be missing something here.
More often than not, what you're seeing is a baby chimp. And a baby chimp is totally different than an adult chimp, whether male or female, number one. Number two, a lot of cases, they're not actually chimps, they're orangutans, which are not as dangerous. So for instance, there was that Clint Eastwood movie, which I actually talked about in the book, Every Which Way But Loose. And you actually have an orangutan.
Clint is driving a truck hanging with an orangutan.
Yeah.
And you're saying that is possible because orangutans are, what do they call them? The wild man of the forest.
Right.
They're
much less violent.
Yeah.
They're much less violent.
They seem, if anybody seems more human, they seem temperamentally closer to us than chimps.
Yes. And recently, the field of primatology has tried to explain, as these sorts of facts have come out, they've tried to say, well, maybe we're more like bonobos. But both chimps and bonobos, if you look at, I could give other demonstrations of what I'm trying to say, but just give one. The Zoo Association's recommendations, if a chimp or a bonobo escapes, is shoot to kill. They don't, and by the way, they don't have those recommendations for big cats, which again, could kill you anytime they want. So no, these are very, very dangerous animals.
So this is like a well-known secret.
That's right.
This is like everybody who deals with chimps.
Yes.
In the world of, I don't know if chimpology is a word, perhaps I've just coined it, but those who live in that world know that chimpanzees are extremely dangerous.
Absolutely. Not only that, if you talk to people who work with macaques, which are related, they're small monkeys, they'll tell you macaques are very dangerous. They're like 15, 20 pounds. They're very dangerous. They're very violent. They will attack you. You're
telling me I shouldn't get a monkey?
No. The only monkey that people have ever really lived with is the capuchin monkey, the so-called organ grinder monkey. And even that is not classified as tame. So no, that's not a particularly dangerous animal, but it's not actually a tame animal in the sense of like, we don't usually think of cats as being as receptive to people as dogs in certain ways. But, my wife comes home from work the cats run to the door, just as a dog would. You're never going to get that with a capuchin monkey. He might go the other direction. You know, you don't get that kind of rapport with
So
people.
this idea that monkeys are affectionate. Well, we're talking about monkeys. We're talking about. I mean, let's just go back to your basic your thesis of your book, which is titled "The Primate Myth," is that we've been sold this idea that human beings are extremely close to
Chimps,
to
gorillas,
monkeys,
yeah.
chimps, whatever, and that's simply not true. And you give all kinds of information, and we're touching on some of it here. But what you just mentioned about, the cats running to the door, based on what I have seen, and again, at this point you realize it's propaganda, but, the Little Rascals, the Argane comedies, Spanky had a monkey, or at least he wanted a monkey, and he got one in one of the episodes. And I know people that have had those kinds of monkeys, with the long tail. That was probably in vogue in the 1920s and 30s or something like that. But that's a different, that's something quite different. Those kinds of monkeys will not harm you.
I can't say specific, about specific different species, but, there are like 500 primate species. So you'd have to, know something about this type of monkey versus
Right.
that type of monkey.
Right.
People obviously have lived with capuchin monkeys, so-called organ grinder monkeys.
For how many years before they were killed?
No. Organ grinder monkeys are not, it's, by the way, it's also the animal that you see when you see Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they have the charming monkey who unfortunately dies.
Yeah.
That's a capuchin monkey.
The
They're
charming
a little
monkeys.
different.
I think the capuchin monkey is the monkey that Spanky had. Spanky McFarlane in the Argane comedies. I'm pretty sure that was that monkey. But we have to go back to chimps. This myth persists. Recently, there's been in the news, this tiny cute monkey in Japan named Punch, and people are just goo and gaga over cute little Punch, the Japanese monkey. I don't know if a monkey can be Japanese, but it lives in Japan.
Well, there are monkeys that are native to Japan. There are no monkeys that are native to the United States, Canada, or Europe, or
And
primates at
that's
all.
the only reason we've survived this far, I guess. So, but that's a very recent iteration of this myth that we're sold, that they're just, we can dress them up like babies, and we can, but there's no evidence that Punch is violent.
I don't know. Obviously, I'm not disputing that we're descended from apes, and there are anatomical similarities.
I would dispute that, but that's another conversation. Go ahead.
The anatomical similarity, though, even that, which I didn't even talk about in the book because it's such a minor point, is actually not that great. So, for instance, but there's one particular point.
The similarity between us and apes
and a
is
chimp.
not that great.
Yeah, if you
I've read
compare-
about that.
yeah,
Talk
if you
about
com-
that,
well,
because it's pretty dramatic.
When they did computer tests and they looked at, were humans anatomically similar to chimps, and then they compared that to other groups within orders that had been organized by classification experts, they found that we were actually less like chimps than toads are like frogs. Now, that may sound like a small difference, but they're actually...
That's dramatic, what you
That's
just
right. They're
said.
completely different orders. So
We are less like chimps
anatomically,
than toads are like frogs.
which are different orders, yeah. And in fact, we don't even meet the definitional requirements of the primate order. This is one of the fascinating things about the promotion of the idea of humans as primates. Primates are defined in two ways, and you can just look this up. The two ways are that you're supposed to have flat nails, which we do have. We don't have claws. And the second way is that you're supposed to have prehensile feet. Those are feet that are
I'm
basically...
supposed to have prehensile feet?
If you were a primate. If you were a primate.
Oh, if I were a primate.
Yeah, and prehensile feet are feet that are basically hands that you can use for climbing, because primates live in trees. Except we don't have prehensile feet. We don't meet the definitional requirements of the order. And by the way, in the life, both your and my lifetime, there were 6 families in the primate order. There are 6. There are 5 today. Well, what happened? One of the 6 families was tree shrews. And at some point, primatologists noticed, because you'd think they would have noticed it before, tree shrews have claws. So they said, well, we've got to come up with a different order for them. So they created a new order called...
They have their own order.
Yeah, it's called Scandentia. But we continue to be in the primate order, though we don't meet the definitional requirements of the order. And why don't we meet the definitional requirements of the order? Because we don't live in trees and we don't eat tree leaves. And by the way, even the few primates that are largely terrestrial, like, for instance, gorillas, during the dry season, they go up in trees and they eat tree leaves. We don't do this. We don't live in trees. We don't eat tree leaves.
We tend not to live in trees.
Yeah.
We tend not to have claws. Most of us don't have prehensile feet.
Right.
So the bare bones of your thesis are that we are not primates. We have been misclassified as primates, and somebody needs to do something about this.
That's right. And by the way, again, talking about this, there's been deliberate effort to mislead people about this. There was a famous study that was done many, many, many years ago, decades ago, which claimed that humans were 98.6% the same genetically.
Okay, that has been said a billion times. I have heard that a billion times. And let's be clear, it's sort of a meaningless statement. It's like a thing you say, but what does that even, what exactly does that mean? No one knows. It's just repeated and repeated and repeated to kind of push this idea that we're extremely similar.
Yeah, there are two problems. As you say, first off, it's meaningless. You could be very similar genetically and totally different in terms of behavior, and we know that with many different animals. But the other thing is, it's literally not true. Just as like we're literally not primates, we don't meet the definitional requirements of the order, we literally are not 98.6% the same genetically as chimps. And this has been known by people who are familiar with the genetics for a very long time. So the original study that claimed this was based on 3 false premises. So the first false premise they made was they said, basically what they did was they looked at the chimp genome, and wherever they saw some correspondence to human sets of genes, they'd say, oh, that's the same. They ignored several key points. First off, some chimps have many, many, many more genes than humans. There is a subspecies of chimps that has 100 million more nucleotide pairs in its genome than humans. That's 4 to 5% of the total genome. So they just ignored that. So within a few years, by about 2005, they were saying, well, no, maybe, they didn't publicize this to the general public, but experts in the subject were saying, well, maybe it's more like 5% were different from chimps. They also ignored the fact that there's something called microindels or microdeletions. So within a gene, you could have small numbers of genes that are missing, and this will dramatically change how the gene functions. So they just ignored that. Well, it turns out that's very important. They thought, well, that's not very important. It turns out it's very important. Now that we know more about genetics, we know that's very important. The third thing they did was sometimes genes are repeated. So you have the same gene, it's repeated. And they said, well, that's irrelevant. That doesn't mean anything. It turns out it actually does mean something. In fact, it can be a cause, for instance, of schizophrenia. So they ignored all these things. So by the year 2000, a study had come out saying, well, we're at least 10% different genetically than chimps. Then in April, not quite a year ago, a study came out in Nature magazine. This is the most prestigious science publication in the world. It was done by 123 of the top geneticists in the world, including people from the Human Genome Project. These are the leading experts on the human genome, the National Institute of Health, and the Howard Hughes Medical Center. And they said, no, we're somewhere between 13.5% and 15% different genetically than chimps. The whole thing was complete nonsense. And they keep peddling this. They don't want to admit that it's not true.
Okay, so we have to deal with, this is the chimp in the room. Why do they keep pushing this? Why have I heard the nonsense? Even if it were true, you'd wonder why I keep hearing this. But now that we know it's dramatically false, why do some people seem to be so invested in the idea that we are biologically similar to chimps?
Well, in the book, towards the end, I have a chapter where it's a short chapter, but briefly I try to address this. One reason, by the way, is related to something you were sort of incidentally referring to, which is chimps do have a kind of mischievous sense of humor, and I think we kind of relate to that, and we kind of feel like, that's kind of like us. So that's one reason. A second reason is, in the case of the field of primatology, this is how they get their funding. So they're not really interested in telling us something different. The third reason, I think maybe the most powerful reason, is one we've already mentioned, which is a lot of the people are atheists, and they're rabid atheists, and they like this image of humans as nothing more than souped up chimps. So the fact that it's false is not really their interest.
I know
But
you're
let
not trying to correct me up, but the term souped up chimps corrects me up.
But no, they said Franz de Waal said in his book, he wrote this book, Chimpanzee Politics, right at the beginning of the book.
Chimpanzee Politics?
That's what the book's called, which has had a huge influence. It led to a whole series of other books, including a book called The Moral Animal that was very influential. Jared Diamond wrote this book, The Third Chimpanzee. The third chimpanzee is supposed to be humans. The idea is we're just like chimps. Many influential books have been written, influenced by de Waal's book, Chimpanzee. But he says right on the first page of the book, maybe it's the second page, I forget. He says chimps hold up a mirror to human nature. He says right at the beginning of the book. But if you observe chimps, they obviously don't. So this is not true. And as we now know...
And not true. I call that a lie.
Right. So...
But this goes way back. I mean, Desmond Morris wrote the book, The Naked Ape.
Right. Well, he was a zookeeper. He was chief gamekeeper in the London Zoo. And he was familiar with many of the profound differences. And he did discuss them. But again, it's still the model. The paradigm is we're apes. And you have to think of us as apes. But anyway, let me give one final reason, though, that I think is really important. One of the points in my book is that if we're to think about humans in terms of animal models, a better way to think of us than primates is a little bit like a herd or a pack animal. And herd or pack animals, their identity to some significant degree comes from being part of the herd or the pack. And when you're that type of animal, it's very, very difficult to give up ideas, and since we're a language animal, we have ideas, sometimes stupid ideas, but we have ideas, that are false. They become part of your identity, and you'll fight for them rapidly. So it would really, really impair many of these people's sense of identity if something that they believed for decades were false. And I think that, one of the points of the book is that there's so many ideas that people have that are insane and ridiculous. And one I talk about in the book is Marxism. So we know Marxism is false empirically. We know it doesn't work because we've seen countries that have tried to employ it. Right. But it doesn't even make sense as a theory because it's based on an economic idea called labor theory of value. Labor theory of value is the idea that how much labor is in an item explains its labor cost explains its actual value. And you can point out to anyone, well, is the cost of a winter coat the same in September or in February? Of course it's not. But of course, according to the labor theory of value, it should be the same amount of labor went into it in September and in February. So it's obviously false.
Well, you could spend years working on a really crummy product, and the years of labor you put into it don't make the product less crummy.
Exactly. A terrible novelist spent 50 years writing a terrible book. It's still worthless. So clearly, and today economists know about this thing called marginal utility. They know this is not true. Marx was a contemporary with the people who developed marginal utility, Karl Menger and this guy Walter Stanley Jevons. He just wasn't interested in what anybody else had to say, so he never learned any of this stuff. But Marxism is entirely based on this. So it's not only that Marxism doesn't work, it doesn't even make sense as a theory. It's like if you had a theory of physics where you say, well, no, gravity, that's wrong. I have my own theory. Okay, you have your own theory, but it's a wrong theory. But actually, gravity is true.
I hate to go meta here, but what we're talking about is the way ideas catch on, whether they're true or false. People become invested in ideas. I mean, in the beginning of the book, when you talk about this primate myth, how loath people are to let go of it. I mean, but we've seen that with so many things in our lives. Yeah. But it is interesting. I mean, if you're studying human beings, our propensity to do that, it's not a happy thing to think about. Yeah. But it's really clear in the case, I mean, obviously, science has been infected with this from the beginning, but once Darwin puts out his theory of evolution, it's like if you want to move forward in your career as a scientist, don't question that. No. Don't go there. No. And that obviously carries on to what we're talking about, that people are invested in this idea that, of course, there's no significant difference between human beings and apes. It's just, it's 2%, whatever that means. Yeah. But people have been peddling that.
And your whole identity is bound up with it. But it's the same thing with, Marxism, intersectionality, all these bizarre ideas. They are very, very important to people. And I actually make the point too in the book, these kinds of evolutionary theorists, they promoted the idea that, men try to gain power so they can have as many children as possible. Well, you look at some of the most powerful people who've ever lived. Hitler, he didn't have any children. Stalin, well, I think he had two children.
I know he had a daughter.
Svetlana, yeah. He had a son too, who was a hockey player.
Are you kidding?
Bad hockey player.
You're just trying to crack me up. I know it. You're deadpanning, but you're trying to make me laugh. Stalin had a son who was a bad hockey player.
Well, not a professional, but he wanted to be a professional. He aspired to be a professional. He was just a drunk, I think.
Well, and this ties in again. It's the whole Freudian narrative. It's all about libido. It's all about these ideas. I mean, that's kind of what I was touching on a second ago. These ideas become the cultural thing. Yeah. And if you want to move forward, you just latch on to the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And this primate myth is a huge piece of that, the zeitgeist of the last 100 years or 150.
Yeah, absolutely. And another subject I talk about in the book is war. And, the way people have been interpreting war doesn't make any sense. So the primatologist view of war is, primates are very violent, therefore humans have wars because we're primates. But there's a problem with this theory, which is that if you look at the animals that we use in wars, horses, elephants, camels, dogs, sea lions, dolphins, pigeons, what do they have in common? They're all tame animals. And we also know that the most even Franz de Waal admitted this, the most warlike animal we know of is the ant. That's like a super obedient animal. So clearly wars, and if you look at the examples they tried to cite to show war making among primates, as violent as they are, they're just not organized animals. They're not cooperative animals. You have to be, to really fight a war.
Chimps are not organized?
Not terribly.
I just want to be very clear. They're not, no, they're obviously not. But I've read about, groups of chimps going on hunts. I know, but we want to anthropomorphize it and make it sound like a war campaign. Yeah. It's a hunt.
Well, they get they're basically, fruitarians or herbivores. They get 1% to 3% of their diet from meat. Most of the meat they literally just come across an animal and beat it to death. They're very strong and very fast. And they just beat it. We do have tape, we actually have film of their occasionally hunting. So they do rarely hunt, and meat plays some role in their social hierarchy. So they do it a very little bit. With humans, we know from assessment of paleontology, in prehistoric times, humans were getting, prior to the invention of agriculture, we were getting like 60% of our food.
Oh, so another major difference is that chimps or apes, or what term can we use here? Because we haven't touched much on gorillas.
Gorillas don't eat any meat.
They don't eat any meat.
They're pure herbivores, yeah.
They're vegetarians like Hitler.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And orangutans are principally vegetarians.
Yes.
And chimps are vegetarians.
All primates.
They're all vegetarians. So that's a major, major difference.
Well, chimps eat a little bit. They eat a little bit. They eat a very little bit.
A tiny bit of meat, as long as they kill it with their own hands.
Yeah, and we have seen them hunt. They are capable of hunting, but they don't do it very well. The more chimps there are in the group, the worse they do. So they don't work together very well. But war is a cooperative activity, sadly. But one of the points I make in the book, so that's number one. So we have to think of war as a cooperative activity. A really interesting thing that has completely missed the whole field of political science. Since women's suffrage was introduced, 1920 in the United States and England, and obviously much later in many other countries, no country in which women can vote has ever gone to war with any other country in which women can vote. It's never happened. So this whole idea, would we just inevitably get into wars?
I just want to make sure I'm taking this in here. No country in which women can vote has ever gone to war with another country in which women can vote.
That's right. The closest example you can give is in
Could women not vote in Germany during the Second War?
There was no voting.
Oh,
From 1933 on, they had the enabling law. There was no voting.
I forgot about Hitler.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about Hitler. Could women vote in Poland in the 30s?
It was a dictatorship under what's his name, Pilsudski. Yeah, I think their last elections were like 1928 or something. But they didn't. Remember, they didn't go to war. They were attacked by a dictatorship.
Well, no, I know. Yeah.
No, the closest example, I've done a lot of research on this. The closest example you can possibly come up with is in 1999, Pakistan attacked India, and they had a brief war called the Kargil War. But in most of Pakistan, leaving aside the fact it's not really a democracy because the secret, the ISI, this Islamic secret service basically runs the country. In most of the country, it's kind of like the Jim Crow South, or at the time it was, women were theoretically able to vote, but they actually weren't able to vote. So like 2/3 to 3/4 of Pakistan women didn't vote.
Okay, so tie this back to our previous chimp conversation, because I know you were going someplace with this.
Yes.
About the war, yeah.
Well, war is not, it's not this primate aggression that's the problem. It's quite the opposite. It's that the primary problem is that we're a very tame and obedient species. So you have these evil people, Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Ayatollah Khamenei, et cetera. You have these evil people, and they say, go out and kill people. And young men are obedient, and they do it. They don't have a well-developed sense of identity, and they do it. They follow orders.
What I pick up, as I was reading your book and the general thesis, it really seems to me a project designed to denigrate human beings. That's what it always seems to be. Like what you just said, that we're warlike because
we're primates.
We're primates, or and it's been very chic in our lifetimes to denigrate people. Aren't people terrible? And you think, well, compared to what?
Yeah, and another aspect of this is this whole idea, well, that's been widely promoted, though to be fair, many people in the field of primatology have said it's meaningless, but there are people who have said, oh, well, look, chimps never know paternity. They have no idea who their father is. So they've said, well, humans could be highly promiscuous. Look, chimps are highly promiscuous. Bonobos are highly promiscuous. Humans could be highly promiscuous too. And it actually turns out that this is completely false. So again, to be fair, a number of primatologists have poo-pooed this, said it's a ridiculous comparison. Our sexuality is very different from primate sexuality. But one of the things I talk about in the book is in recent years, because of the advance of genetics, they've actually been able to study how common is what they call false paternity or extra-parafertilization. This is where a child is not, their father is not whom they think. So they've actually been able to study it, and they found it's actually quite unusual all over the world that the typical rates are below 2% or below 3%. It's actually the exception, not the rule. It seems, and also we know from something called sexual dimorphism, which is basically the difference in size between males and females. With humans, the difference in size is usually about 15%. That's characteristic of a highly monogamous species, and it seems that we've been highly monogamous for like 300,000 years.
300,000 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but they've been another thing that's been promoted. There's a book called Sex at Dawn that's really promoted the idea. Humans can be naturally promiscuous. You can engage in polyamory, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't work. It's not in our nature. Our nature is basically monogamous.
But see, that's another one of these myths. I mean, Margaret Mead, that whole thing was totally exploded, revealed to be nonsense. But I mean, I touched on this earlier, the way I'm fascinated in my book, Is Atheism Dead, with how information travels, because something might be true or something might be proven false. But if most people don't know that,
right,
the myth carries on.
It's funny you say that. My publisher told me to cut my book before it came out. They said it'd be better if and I cut about 5,000 words, and I probably should have cut another 5,000 words just to make the argument simpler and clearer. But I actually had a section on Derek Freeman and Margaret Mead, and I cut it out because I said,
Can you publish it as an essay someplace?
Maybe. But I just decided it didn't really have much to do with the main themes of the book. But this was Coming of Age in Samoa was read by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people.
But it's not just that it was read. Most people didn't read it, but they bought the lie. The lie was pushed and pushed and pushed. And it's complete nonsense, proven to be nonsense.
Right.
But I mean, this has happened over and over. Kinsey,
Yep.
The Kinsey lie, foisted on the American public like crazy forever.
Yeah.
And then I guess in the 90s, completely exploded and exposed, but no one ever, is clear about that. The New York Times doesn't put a headline out, Kinsey debunked. They have bought into the larger narrative, and they're not really interested in evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, and it gets back to, people get their identity out of their beliefs, and to a large extent, and they don't want to be contradicted, and they don't want to admit that they've been wrong. But yeah, I mean, an even more extreme example, how many people have actually read Das Kapital? I mean, it's such a boring book. Who would actually read it? But people say they're Marxists. And they get very upset if you say, well, but look at what happened in all these countries that adopted Marxism. It didn't work, and 100 million people died. They don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit
And died is putting it nicely. Many of them,
yeah.
of course, were murdered.
Yeah, or died in Arctic wastelands. They were slave labor, and
It is so fascinating to me. But the Margaret Mead, and you're such a great writer. I wish you would have put that chapter in, because you're writing, whatever you're writing about, you're a very entertaining writer, and I think it's important for us to recognize, again, this is the meta narrative. We've been lied to. The culture has pushed. The idea that science is at odds with faith, the idea that there are all of these things that we've seen in the last 150 years. They've been pushed so hard that it seems that it'll take us some time to dig out. And your book is a great step in the right direction.
Thank you. No, it's a huge problem, and I've asked a number of the people that I talked about in the book to debate me. For instance, I offered to fly out to Los Angeles to debate Jared Diamond, who wrote The Third Chimpanzee, and he to his credit, we have a mutual friend. To his credit, he wrote back. He's an old man. He's in his 80s, but he wrote back and he said, "Well, I haven't written about chimps in 30 years," so he didn't want to debate it. I wrote to Richard Dawkins. I said, "I'll fly to Oxford. I'll debate you at Oxford." Of course, he's too busy. It's too busy to debate me in Oxford. He's too busy to debate me at his home. There are a whole series of people. They don't want to acknowledge that they're in error, but as you say, they're going around propagating very false ideas. And by the way, specifically talking about Dawkins, one of the points you made in your book, "Is Atheism Dead?" is that this whole issue of how could the universe have been created? Stephen Hawking and other people who are genuine cosmologists said, this is an extraordinary event which involved coincidences of astronomical, forgive the unintended pun, astronomical levels of unlikelihood, which is correct?
Both.
Oh. So, you can read Dawkins writing about atheism. He'll never talk about this. He'll never acknowledge this. And again, I'm not here to promote religion. I don't know enough about it. And
you're here to promote truth, and that's why I love, what you write. I mean, truth ought to matter, and for some of these folks, truth for them exists in whatever narrative they're pushing, and if there's evidence against it, they're not keen on being honest about that.
Right.
You would think, though, that if they really believed in what they claim to believe, that they would think that challenges would sharpen their point. I think of I feel like the criticisms of religion during the French Enlightenment sharpened the Christian faith of some of the Americans in particular. Forces you to deal with, like, well, okay, maybe we need to let this go. Maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe our idea will be stronger. If that's it's not just the scientific process. It ought to be the human process, that we actually care about truth. But I think folks like this, they don't talk about truth very much.
They're totally around, and it often involves a huge amount of egotism as well. I think it's pretty obvious.
Well, the couple of examples you made in the beginning of the book, I think it was, what's his name, Franz de Waal?
Yeah.
The way they brush aside evidence to the contrary, it's sort of breathtaking in some ways. You think this should interest you.
Yeah. No, I mean, he did it continually. And he doesn't even bother presenting contrary arguments. So I could give 20 examples. It's boring, but yeah.
Well, give one, because I've alluded to the idea that they're examples, I hope people read the book.
I was working on the book. I went down to the Emory National Primate Research Center, which was fascinating. The people were lovely. And one of the people I interviewed was James Rilling, who's one of the leading neuroscientists in the country. And he had worked for Duvall, because Duvall had been head of what was formerly called the Yerkes Primate National Research Center. Interesting story of how they changed the name and why they changed the name. But anyway, Rilling told me, he liked Duvall, but Rilling told me Duvall said, if you come up with research based on what's called functional magnetic resonance imaging tests, these are tests of the imaging tests of the brain, from which a vast amount has been learned, which was not known 20, 25 years ago, that shows that the human brain is different from the chimp brain. And we know more and more. I have a whole chapter in the book that goes into vast detail about this. Don't say that this is true unless you can absolutely definitively show that there's some sort of basis for this and why it's true, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, he was trying to discourage his subordinate from disproving his own ideas. So, you know, there are many other instances I can cite, but yeah, they're not really interested in people understanding how different our brain is and how different also the neurochemistry is. So our brain uses different neurotransmitters to function. The proportions are completely different than you'd find in a chimp, which makes sense because we're a totally different animal.
But we're a totally different animal for sure. What we haven't talked about is the language issue. And this almost becomes funny in a way that when you think about the difference, you know, you could, for a minute, you could just say, well, forget about the genes. Let's just talk about the fact that we're having a conversation, right. That human beings create art and
have done it from the earliest times.
Literature.
Yeah.
How can you conceivably put an ape in the same category as people who are capable of creating civilizations? And what it seems on the face of it comic in a way.
Yeah, and our survival is completely dependent on our ability to communicate using language. And language is incredibly complicated. So I give one example in the book, which is a sort of semi-famous one. In the movie, as well as the play, The Philadelphia Story, which some people may have seen, an old movie with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart. At one point in the story, this man who is Katharine Hepburn's fiance says he's objecting to the fact that she's gone on a midnight swim with Jimmy Stewart the night before their wedding. And he says, a woman should behave herself naturally. And Cary Grant, who he's divorced from Katharine Hepburn's character and wants to remarry her, says, a woman should behave herself naturally. Now, that's exactly the same sentence. It's just the emphasis that changes the meaning. So it's not only that the words convey so many different meanings, but how we say things. It's incredible. The fact that anyone can understand anyone else is an amazing accomplishment. And, you know, it's an interesting thing. Almost all species at birth, except humans, can walk if they have the ability to walk at any time in their lives. You know, so you see baby foals and colts, and, you know, they get right up. And baby giraffes, they get right up. And, you know, chimps, they get right up. They start walking. Well, in their case, they get right up. They start climbing.
And start killing each other.
That takes later.
That takes years.
That comes later. But they immediately have this ability to coordinate themselves. And as we know, you know, humans, it could be a year before a human can walk, if not more. And this is a fascinating question. Why is it? I mean, we have this big brain. Shouldn't we be able to do it very quickly? And it seems that no, actually what we're doing most of the first year of our life is we're learning to listen and to talk. That's what most of our brain is focused on doing. And it's growing very rapidly, and it's working very hard at this. That's of higher priority in terms of our survival than learning to walk. Think about how crazy that is. That's amazing. But it makes sense when you think, how could you survive if you can't understand other people? You know, so our whole nature is totally different than these apes.
So you're saying we're not apes? Is that what you're saying?
Again, yeah. But I'm also saying something else, which is not necessarily completely consistent with a religious viewpoint, which is that if we were to try and understand humans from any animal model, we could perhaps use animal models, but we'd have to use animal models of animals that use some language, that are tame, and that are cooperative. And these are not primates. But we maybe could learn something from studying, you know, maybe it's a tiny little bit. We maybe could study more from studying animals like dolphins and elephants and wolves, you know, because they do have some of these traits. But we would learn almost nothing from studying chimps.
Well, one of these lies that has been thrown around, the idea, now it's decades ago, but cocoa was it a chimp or no, gorilla?
Gorilla,
The
yeah.
gorilla who supposedly was able to communicate with sign language and but again, that was so pushed. And I think it's pushed partly just because it's entertaining. The idea
Right.
of it is entertaining, but it's basically not true. Or they'll show you painting. This is a painting done by, Chimp 342 in a cage there, and he just because human beings are capable of creating hideous abstract art doesn't mean that a chimp with a paintbrush is doing anything that we can call art. It's just funny.
It's a lot of when you actually unpack the pictures that have been taken, video that's been taken, film that's been taken of chimps supposedly learning language very well, what you actually discover is they don't learn it as well as dogs. Dogs can learn it much better. A lot of what they're doing, it's not clear that they're actually learning phonemes. That is, that they're learning words. Often what they're doing is they're just pointing at a pictogram on a monitor, and they're saying, I want this or I want that. And that's what they've really learned. Do they learn some words? Yeah, they probably learn some words, but not as many as dogs. The thing that they seem to be reasonably good at as animals go is they can do some use of tools. So for instance, it's been seen that chimps have
Power tools?
not power tools.
No.
They will take a stick and they will take the stick and they will even sharpen the stick and they'll stick it into a
Termite hill.
that's right. They'll that
I've
can
done
do.
the same thing. I learned it from a chimp. No, I mean,
But it's interesting. Just forgive me. They've actually found that crows and ravens also can make tools.
Yes.
Probably depends on which authority you listen to. Maybe better.
yeah.
So, you go, okay, all right, they can do that. Great.
Do you have any hope that that something will come of all of the research you've done in this book, The Primate Myth? I mean, it really seems scandalous that we've come this far and people are still peddling this. Although, again, we've mentioned it a few times here, that's just what happens. People grab onto something and it carries on for decades and decades. Even once it's been proved false, it just gets reprinted in textbooks or whatever.
No, it's true. I mean, I was just looking, somebody showed me a couple days ago, they showed me an outline of an anthropology, high school anthropology course. And almost the entire first term, the fall term of the course, was study of primates. And apparently the advanced placement test is heavily based on that. You're supposed to learn about different primates and the history of primates and the history of, Lucy and all this stuff, which really has very little to do with humans or human nature. And anthropology is supposed to be the study of humans. So it's really bizarre. I do hope it has a big effect. I think actually, you're talking about political implications. I think the political implications are really profound. Getting back to the subject of war, if we understood, generally understood, that the democratic countries aren't the ones who are starting wars, and I might add, there's a whole idea in academia that's constantly promoted of Western imperialism. Again, since women got the vote, can you name a Western country that's been involved in imperialism? Who's involved in imperialism? China's trying to expand into the South Seas. Russia invaded Ukraine. These are the countries that are actually, Cuba's been involved in a lot of imperialism. They went into Nicaragua. It turns out they were basically running things in Venezuela, we now discover. No, we were not. That's not the Western countries. In fact, the really worrisome thing is that we're so supine when we're attacked. So people, immigrants come in who shouldn't be here and they attack people. And everyone's like, well, they've had a hard time and, blah, blah. Instead of saying, a crazy example is here in New York City where the mayor is saying that ICE agents, immigration and customs agents, can't go into jails to find people who are here illegally. Well, first off, the U.S. Constitution says that naturalization of citizens is a federal responsibility. It's not a state or city responsibility. So this is unconstitutional. But let's leave that aside. Why are you protecting violent criminals in jails from immigration agents? No, the problem isn't that we're imperialists. The problem is that we're incredibly passive about threats that are presented to us.
It's extraordinary. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. Let me ask you now, The Primate Myth, that's the book we've been discussing. Can people read your plays someplace?
Yeah, a few of them are available online. You can purchase a few of them either digitally or
Do you have
physical
Do you
copies.
have a website, Jonathan?
I do. People can find it. It's Jonathan Leaf, Leaf, and they can buy the book. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Simon & Schuster, etc.
And in the Primate House at the zoo here, it's not available.
It's not available.
It's pointedly unavailable
yeah.
in their gift shop. I want to be very clear.
But they can't. The primates can't read it, so that's okay.
That's what you say.
Yeah.
That's what you say. You're just, grinding your axe. No, this is just delightful. There's so much more information, so I hope folks will read the book. And I really do hope something comes of it because it actually matters.
Right.
And that's the subtext of this conversation. It actually matters whether we are simply the third chimpanzee or whatever.
Yeah.
So, listen, for all of your work, your research, and sharing your great gifts with us as a writer and here, I'm very grateful. Jonathan Leaf, thank you.
I'm very grateful. I'm a huge admirer of yours, and people won't see it, but I'm begging and pleading with you to sign some of the copies I have of your books.
I think I'll probably be able to squeeze it in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Thank you so much.
If you think these conversations are valuable, would you do us a favor and please like this video and subscribe to this channel? When you do that, you help us get these conversations out to a wider audience by telling YouTube that people are interested in this. Also, you can go to SocratesInTheCity.com, sign up for our newsletter, and you can check back every week. There's new stuff here every week. Thank you for tuning in.